Preparing my slides of doing more and planning to talk fast, or doing less and planning to talk slow, and I chose the more talk fast option. So I'm going to just tear through this. All right, so let's get started. Hi, I'm Ken Stevens, work at Smile CDR, been there for many years, and I manage the team of developers that maintains the HAPI FHIR code base. And what I'm here to talk with you about today is HAPI FHIR's support for subscriptions, and with a particular emphasis on the new R5 subscriptions, and talk a little bit about how they're different, and then where the state of HAPI FHIR support for R5 subscriptions is, including R4B, as well as the R4 backport of R5 subscriptions. A little about the timeline here. So DSTU3 R4 came out 2017, 2018 with a subscription model. Subscriptions are about getting a push-based notification when something changes in the repository. So you subscribe to a particular resource that you're interested in, or maybe a resource with some search parameters, and then any changes to those resources in the repository that match your criteria will then be sent to you. So this R4 subscriptions have been around for a long time. They're super stable, widely used at massive scale. So the HAPI FHIR implementation of R4 subscriptions is very hardened and tested and robust. In 2013, a whole new model for subscriptions came out in R5, introducing new resource types, subscription topic, subscription status, as well as a new bundle type, subscription notification. And these new resource types are represented in FHIR. So in R5, they're in FHIR. There's a version of R4 called R4B, which is a FHIR version that basically is R4 plus these new resource types added into it. And then if you're on R4 and are interested in using some of this tooling, there is a backport that, in a limited way, backports some of the functionality of R5, but in a limited way. And I'll go into details about what that looks like. But before I get started, I wasn't sure if you're going to be in the room. Just shout out to Gino Canessa. Gino is the one who designed R5 subscriptions, sort of the lead. Okay, yes. So if you have any hard questions about the R5 subscription stuff, Gino will know the answers. I'm just the implementer. All right, so let's talk a little bit about R4 subscriptions. What does an R4 subscription look like? These are the ones that are the most widely used ones. Basically, there's two parts to it. There's the trigger and then the notification. The trigger is defining what kinds of changes am I interested in subscribing to. And the notification is, what do I do when one of those changes happens? In the R4 spec, it makes references to these 5 specific types of common things that you might want to do. You might want to send an email or SMS. The two most common, well, by far and away the most common one is REST hook, which is just send this resource to another FHIR server. The second most common one is message, which we're seeing more and more of nowadays, which is put it on a Kafka topic or an active MQ JMS queue. So looking at a specific example, let's say you have a diabetes management system and you want to be notified anytime there's a new type 2 diabetes diagnosis of a patient. So you could set up your subscription with a criteria on condition. That's the SNOMED code for type 2 diabetes. And then whenever one of those conditions is updated or created, and that condition has that code, then that resource will be sent on to the REST hook endpoint. This is what it looks like inside the subscription. So a channel type of REST hook, and the endpoint is the URL of the REST hook system you want to send it to. So these are widely deployed. Just talk a little bit about HAPI FHIR extensions to the R4 subscription. And this is interesting because half of these things are now in R5. So these are things that clearly the community needed. I won't go through all of them, but some of the ones I think are worth drawing attention to. If you need more than just the resource, like let's say you want the condition, but you also want the patient resource that it points to, we have something in HAPI FHIR, an extension called payload search result mode, where you basically give it a string with a little placeholder for the resource ID that matched, and it will then send you a bundle with all the resources included. Replication modes used for when subscriptions are replicating data between FHIR servers. You might want to strip the version IDs. Deliver delete events. So this one, especially when you're replicating data, you want to know if it got deleted. In the R4 spec, it only does creates and updates, no delete. That was added in R5. So we have an extension basically that allows for subscribing to delete events. And then we have HAPI FHIR, there's lots of open extension points. You can define your own custom classes that do the delivery, and lots of interception point cuts. Oops, I'm gonna have this clicker here. All right, so how does this change in R5? So fundamentally, the main thing that changes is the trigger and the notification now live in two separate resources. So if we look at our diabetes example, the details about what to do when this trigger happened, that stays in the subscription. But now the trigger of what are we watching for, that moves to a new resource type called subscription topic. And these two are linked with a string, which is the name of the topic. And so this affords all sorts of interesting things. So one thing you can imagine is there might be a fairly complex trigger that is used by many, many different subscriptions. So this could allow you to just put all the details of that complex trigger in one subscription topic, and then have all those different subscriptions basically hang off of that topic. Another really, I think, important benefit of this has to do with security and administration. So if you have the power to create subscriptions, you have the power to be notified of any change on any resource in the FHIR repository. It's very powerful. So most FHIR server admins just lock down this resource and say, hey, if you need a subscription, you need to come to talk to the admin and we'll create it for you. In R5, you can actually ease that up a little bit, and you can say, we're going to lock down what types of topics we publish, what types of events you're allowed to subscribe to, but we'll let our partners and partner organizations create whatever subscriptions they need on their own release life cycles to publish to their own internal systems. So this just makes the security administration a little bit easier. What if you don't want everything from a particular topic? So topics actually allow you to filter on them. So if you imagine one subscription topic, say every time there's a new patient arriving, in your subscription you can actually say, I don't want all of those new patients. I actually only want specific ones. In this case, just patients from Wisconsin who were born after the year 2000. So again, that really makes the separation of the trigger from the notification really powerful. All those different notification resources can specify what particular filters they're interested in. All right. So now talking about what is supported in HAPI FHIR. Just going down a list comparing R4 to R5. The green stuff is supported in HAPI FHIR. The red stuff, not supported yet. That's a short cheat sheet. But I'll just go down this list and talk about them. So as we talked about before, create update, and HAPI FHIR has an extension for delete. R5 supports all these triggers. Something really worth drawing attention to in R5 that is so powerful is that in the update scenario for a subscription, you can now specify the criteria for the previous version of the resource and for the new version of the resource. So imagine you're interested in a state change of a particular resource, like in workflow, you might be watching for particular task state transitions. You can now say, hey, my subscription is on when the resource goes from this status into this status. So really, really powerful. For filters, we have limited support. So we basically have sort of the simple easy case, which is this parameter equals this, or this parameter doesn't equal that. Basically, there's other things in the spec that, for other comparators or modifiers, not supported yet. For the payload, so payload is, what is being sent. The R4 spec allows for just to be notified. That's the empty payload. And the idea there being that you want to really have a very secure server, so you don't want to actually send the data out. You basically send a notification and say, hey, something has changed here that you're interested in, and then the caller makes a REST call back, and you can then enforce all the permissions on that REST call back when they can query to find out what changed. They might keep track of like, the last updated time of the last data they got, and they say, send me everything since that last updated time. R5 introduces a compromise between those two extremes of nothing and everything. You can actually just get the IDs. So what is in the notification? So in R4, just typically it's the resource, unless you're using our payload search mode in HAPI FHIR, in which case you can get a bundle. R5, you always get a bundle, and it's quite a complex bundle. The first entry in the bundle is a subscription status that has lots of details about the match that triggered this notification. Then it's followed by something called the focus resource, which is sort of the main resource that notification is about. And then you can have includes and reverse includes. So actually, in this sense, actually our R4 support is actually richer than our R5 right now, because we haven't implemented the includes, rev includes yet. And then next thing to talk about is statistics. So the FHIR specifications provide specs for how you can ask the server about how many subscriptions were delivered, for which subscription resources, those sorts of metrics. We haven't implemented that in R4 or R5. In R4, they recommend in the spec, creating audit events and communication resources. And we just imagine, on these servers that are sending millions or trillions of resources out, that would just completely balloon out your FHIR server. It didn't make sense for us to do that. None of our customers have asked us to do that. R5 has a lighter weight. We could have lighter weight tables behind it to track all these things. But in reality, our customers who want to know this stuff, they just use something like OpenTelemetry or some monitoring tool. They're not going to rely on the FHIR repository to track those metrics for themselves. So there hasn't so far been any ask for that. And then lastly, talking about subscription activation. So you can imagine there's a delay between uploading the subscription to the FHIR server and it's now listening to changes and sending out notifications. That process is called activation. When you first post the subscription, it's in requested status, and then once it's up and running, it goes into active status. So the process for that in R4 is simply whether the server is configured to support that type of subscription. In HAPI FHIR, there's like literally Boolean flags. You say, yes, we support WebSockets, yes, we support REST hook, And so it just either activates it or doesn't activate it based on the configuration. R5 has a more complex process that involves handshakes with the client and server. For activating subscriptions, we have not implemented that. So our R5 subscriptions today basically follow the same process as R4. All right, so now let's talk about the backport. So with R5 and R4B, it's straightforward. The trigger piece, there's a resource that has all the details about the trigger. What do you do with that for the R4 backport? There's no resource to put that in. You've got a topic that's in your subscription, but who's going to call the topic? So we have a current design for this and a future design for this. So I'll tell you what we have today. What we have today is basically code. So you can wire in a service that's called a subscription topic dispatcher, and you basically say, here's the topic name, go find all the subscriptions in the system that are subscribed to this topic. Here's the resources to send them. For the R4 backport, there's no subscription status resource. It's represented as parameters, which is the universal catch-all for these sorts of things. We create that parameters resource for you, so you don't have to worry about that. The service does that. It just creates it from the resources and the REST operation type. If you need filtering, we also have implemented this as well. So this is a little more complicated. You can imagine you basically provide a callback to the filter matcher that looks like this, that basically says, hey, here's a filter from the subscription, here's the resource from the dispatch, does it match yes or no or unsupported? And then based on that, it determines whether to send the notification. So that's what it looks like today. What I think, I'll just take a diversion for a future designed for this, where we want to get to is the way we manage subscriptions and subscriptions topic in HAPI FHIR is there's basically an in-memory registry of these. It sits there, and there's an interceptor that watches changes in the repository, and then it checks those changes against those that in-memory repository of subscriptions. So those in-memory subscriptions are in what we call a canonical format. So it's a version independent. We take R4, R5, we convert them all to the same format in memory. And so I think probably what would be an easier, nicer API for HAPI FHIR users would be just to instantiate one of these canonical subscription topics, load it into a registry, and then have the whole mechanism just run for you. Probably be simpler. So I think that's where we want to go with that. Lastly, just want to talk about the roadmap. So here's some recent changes to give you a sense of what kind of development is happening in HAPI FHIR right now around subscriptions. So we recently added the R5 ID. That was just a few weeks ago. That was needed for a project. Support for tag and source subscription criteria actually were only just implemented recently. And I had already 2 conversations at this conference that were both, the answer was use the source subscription criteria. So it really is needed. The approach that HAPI FHIR has taken traditionally is just a guaranteed delivery. If the endpoint's down, wait forever until it comes back up again, and then keep sending things. The idea being that sort of patient safety is paramount here. However, there are some subscription scenarios where it's just an auditing trail, or it's kind of less clinically critical. And customers have asked for a maximum number of retries in a dead letter queue. So that's supported. That was built fairly recently. Transactional integrity. So HAPI FHIR does not have XA transactions, but you can imagine the notification off to another system has to happen asynchronously. So there's this, save the resource to the FHIR repository and put a message on a queue to deal with the subscription stuff. Without XA, you can't sort of guarantee the transactional integrity of that. So what we've done, a recent change, is have a temporary database, so the transaction boundaries around that, including the temporary database, and then there's a separate process that guarantees integrity between removing messages from that and putting them out in the queue. And then partitioning and mega scale support. I'm getting out of time, so I won't talk about that, but just a lot of activity around subscriptions working with that. Current activity, we're going to add last updated. That's on the queue for the August release. We didn't have that one. That's kind of like tag and source. Just somehow got missed. Support for arbitrarily large resources. We don't support today, but somebody needs that. We're going to be adding that. And then separating out, currently all the subscription settings are part of the storage settings in HAPI FHIR. But for configuration management, we want to separate those out. So that's an MR in flight right now. And future enhancements, as I mentioned, I think a subscription topic registry to make it a little easier to work with these in the backport and include and rev include. And just want to mention the requests that we're seeing, a lot of them are coming from the R4 backport. And that's my speed run. Any questions? Yes?
Is there any difference between Smile CDR and HAPI FHIR in terms of this? I'm assuming everything, or is there any differences?
I think pretty much everything I talked about today is a part of HAPI FHIR.
Okay.
Yeah. The question was HAPI FHIR versus Smile CDR. I guess Megascale would be the one thing that would be a Smile CDR thing. What Megascale is running a single repository across multiple physical databases, and this is just to get past like the 10 terabyte or 100 terabyte boundary that the commercial databases have out there now.
Okay. My question is: does the probably a spec or your implementation support the versioning of the resource? What that means is the server makes sure that all the subscribers get the same object, like sort of in a row. Because I'm reading Firecast content management. They actually have the version ID, so make sure that any of the subscriber to get the same version before it can change again.
So yes, there's a couple of things that pertain to this. One is just to avoid complexity, we do have the option of when you're posting it to the target system, just stripping the version ID altogether. But on the other hand, there can be cases where there's a delay for delivering the message out, and you actually want to go back and get the latest version. And And so we also support that as well. This actually came up on a site that was sort of gradually building up a resource in a front-end app. And it was saving the resource as it was being, like it was a wizard, screen by screen. But they didn't want the subscription to keep sending all these interim bits. So there was a delay, and then once they hit save, then it went back and got the latest version of it.
Okay, thanks.
Why is string connecting the topic and the subscription instead of reference?
It's actually a canonical URL. Okay. So, yeah, the reference.
That kind of string.
Yes, that kind of string. Sorry. For the answer, it's a canonical URL. So it's a string, but it's really a canonical URL.
Special kind of string.
Yes, a very special string.
So, Ken, for number 7, many interception points. So what mechanisms are supported to inject Kafka headers?
You can look it up in the documentation. So yeah, I'll just mention what this one was. I give that as an example of using an interceptor. The way that subscriptions are actually implemented in HAPI FHIR is there are 2 sort of broker channels. The initial interceptor basically just puts every single resource change on this internal queue, and then there's a second separate process that then reads off of that and evaluates against all the subscriptions. And then from there, it goes on to delivery queues, and there's separate delivery queues for every endpoint. Because you can imagine if some endpoints are slower down, you don't want that interfering with other endpoints that are quite responsive. So with all of these Kafka channels, if you care about, for example, if you have a custom delivery class that needs some authentication details that were in a message or whatever it is, you can control if you're using Kafka as a topic, for example, you can set the message headers. That's one of the interception points.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're a little bit past time. Thanks, everybody.